Hello, and welcome back to the world of Wysteria. Tonight, I will be reading chapter 22, which will be presented in two parts. Wysteria, chapter 22. So, I guess we have some homework, said Emily, after Jeremy had gone. We should be able to help each other, though. I'm not sure how helpful I'll be, Will replied. This body control business is new to me, too. True, she said, but you know how to control other things, like the rock I threw. I have a feeling you'll pick it up pretty quickly. In fact, I think you may have had some experience with it already. What do you mean? He asked. Emily reminded him of their race to the castle gate. You may be faster than me, she said, but not that much faster. I had a huge head start, and you just flew past me. You had to have done something unnatural. Yes, I'd forgotten about that, he said. But I don't know what I did or how I did it. So you couldn't really call it control. Still, she pointed out, it wasn't just a random accident. You wanted to catch me, and you did. Your natural instincts guided you. I'm sure your mind will be able to figure it out. Maybe so, he said. But traveling is a different matter. Will told her that he'd considered trying to skip, rather than fly, over the river, but had no idea how to accomplish the first step, as Jeremy had referred to it, entering the darkness. I thought about jumping into the ravine, but at this point, I doubt that would work, she said. You know how to save yourself without having to vacate Wysteria. You wouldn't be sent into a panic. Your first impulse would be to use the wind or alter the ground. How do you do it, Emily? He asked. How do you get into the dark? Do you just make yourself fall asleep? No, I don't fall asleep, she answered. I fall into a very dark hole, and at the bottom is my destination. That's the only way I can explain it. But how do you find or create that hole, he said. It's just there, deep inside of me, Emily replied. I let go of everything around me until all that's left is my mind and the image of where I want to go. And then I fall into myself. But you never lose consciousness. No, she said. In order to travel, you have to enter the darkness and remain awake. Otherwise, your dream body dissolves, and your unconscious mind will return to your body in the waking world. On a somewhat related note, he said, as they took hands and began walking along the bank away from the falls. There's something I was wondering about the other day. When we fell asleep together, we actually had two bodies, one here and one back home. Yes, we did, she replied. When we woke up the next night, here, why didn't our bodies in the waking world dissolve, he asked. Is that possible, even theoretically? I don't know, she answered. I suppose that would be a question to ask Jeremy. I've heard of people trying to leave the waking world prematurely, hoping to become a permanent resident here. It usually involved some kind of suicide. But as far as I know, you can't pull your body out of the waking world. There are too many things, including minds other than your own, that hold it there. It was just a thought, said Will. And a very logical one, she said, kissing his cheek. Now, would you like to get started on our exercises? Or do you just want to relax and play until it's time to go? I think I've done enough experimenting for one day, he told her. Let's wait until tomorrow. There was a lot to digest, and he needed to unwind before beginning a new task. That's fine, she said. Is there anything in particular you'd like to do? Will thought for a moment. We could take a hike up to the town, he suggested. Okay, said Emily. Sounds good. As they made their way through the forest, Will remembered what he'd learned after Emily had run off to throw stones. By the way, he said, I found out how old Jeremy is. Really? She said. He told you? Not his exact age, he replied, but he did say that he fought in the Civil War. The American Civil War? Yep. Interesting, she said. I would have guessed he was older than that. How in the world did that come up? Well, he replied, searching for some way to answer without causing her any unnecessary anguish. Jeremy mentioned that he'd been in a war, and I asked him which one. I wasn't trying to find out his age. It was a natural question. He also said he was originally from England, Will quickly continued, without revealing what had prompted Jeremy to speak of war in the first place. I was always curious about his life, his history, said Emily, but whenever I tried to probe, he changed the subject. I'm really glad you two seem to be hitting it off so well. It's good for you to have someone to answer questions and give you guidance. And I think it's good for him, too. He's definitely different since he's met you. In what way? He asked. I told you what he was like before, she answered. Even when he was friendly and eager to talk, he was always detached, like a part of his mind was somewhere else. I can tell he likes talking to you. And I think he respects you. He sees your potential. Will was flattered. It did seem that Jeremy enjoyed their conversations. But he had little doubt that Jeremy's concern for Emily's safety had much to do with his more focused attention. Well, I know he thinks very highly of you, Will told her. He said that you were worthy of his concern. This brought a smile to her lips, a blush to her cheek, and a tear to her eye. That's very sweet, she said quietly. They had passed through the forest and the garden, and were walking up the street that led to the square, when Will abruptly stopped. What is it? Said Emily. I'm not sure, he said. Something feels... Wait here a minute. Why? Where are you going? She asked. Let me take a quick look around inside, he said, trying not to alarm her. It may be nothing. I just want to make sure. Please wait here, okay? Nope, she replied matter-of-factly. Now, Emily. Nope, she said again. Listen, it's pointless, Will. He sighed, knowing that it was. I'll be safe with you, she said with a smile, and I promise I won't get in your way. Fine, he said reluctantly. Let me think for a minute. Will looked up the street toward the entrance of the plaza, now feeling certain that someone, a stranger, was there. And though he didn't want to bring Emily into a potentially dangerous situation, he had to know who it was. Could it be Jeremy, Emily asked, or Charlotte? No, neither of them, he said. Will wanted to get a view of the square without risking being spotted, ambushed perhaps. I have an idea, he announced. Facing the row of buildings that lined the right side of the street, he stared intently at one of the wooden doors and made a few quick adjustments. Let's see if it worked, he said, leading Emily over to the door. Where are we going? She asked. Will turned the knob and pushed the door open. You'll see. Stepping inside, the couple entered a long hallway with another door at the opposite end. They hurried down the hall and passed through the back door into a narrow alley that ran parallel to the street they'd just left. To the south, on their right, the small lane opened onto a perpendicular street. To the north, it ran into the high wall that bounded the square. A dead end, except for a small iron door, half hidden by the leafy vines clinging to the surface of the wall. This way, he said, moving hastily up the alley. Reaching the wall, Will pulled away the vegetation that blocked the door, lifted the rusty latch, and pushed. At first, it refused to yield, but as he applied more pressure, the door slowly opened, stubbornly, creaking and moving stiffly on its hinges, as though long unused. Will led Emily through the doorway and into a narrow passageway. The door opened to their left, nearly blocking the corridor in that direction. That way? Emily asked him, peering down the dark passage to the right. No, he said, pushing the heavy door shut and revealing a steep staircase that led up to another level. Ascending the stairs, they came to a small room, no bigger than a long closet, with a single window looking out onto the square below. Quite cunning, said Emily, as Will went to the window and began scanning the area outside, searching for the cause of his concern. There, he said, directing Emily's attention to a man wearing a light gray coat and stylish hat at the far end of the plaza. He stood with his back to them and was speaking to someone. A woman. That's him. He doesn't belong here. Who is he talking to? She asked. I can't tell, said Will. The man stood between her and them, blocking her from their view. One of the citizens, I think. The stranger then turned and began walking away from the woman, giving them a clear look at her face. It's her, said Emily. The woman we saw at the bonfire. Your kissy friend. Yes, he said. It was Lily. And we will return immediately in the next video with part 2.